What if some of the most gripping tales of crime and corruption ever filmed are not locked behind paywalls, but waiting to be rediscovered for free tonight? In the shadowy world of film noir, every cigarette flicker hides a confession, every glance could betray a soul. These are not just movies, they are blueprints of paranoia. Let us uncover 12 free-to-watch film noir classics legally restored for a new generation. Number 12. The Big Combo, 1955. Joseph H. Lewis crafted a brutal symphony of violence and obsession in The Big Combo, a low-budget noir that looked anything but cheap. The film follows Lieutenant Leonard Diamond, a detective consumed by his pursuit of a sadistic gangster named Mr. Brown, and his mysterious mistress Susan Lowell. The story plays like a descent into the moral rot beneath the American dream. Censors balked at its savagery. The torture scene, with blinding lights and the whisper of death, was considered too realistic for 50s audiences. Studio executives almost shelved it, fearing backlash. Critics were divided, some calling it grotesque, others hailing its purity of noir vision. The director's use of deep shadows and fog created a world where morality no longer existed, only power and decay. When rediscovered in the 70s, The Big Combo became a cult object studied by filmmakers like Scorsese and De Palma for its visual daring. Today, its restored version on public domain platforms gleams like a dark jewel. Watching it is to feel the pulse of corruption itself, flickering through the smoke of a dying era. It is not just a story about crime, but about the cost of obsession when light and shadow finally collapse into one. Number 11. Scarlet Street, 1945. Fritz Lang's Scarlet Street is a masterpiece of cruelty dressed as domestic tragedy. Edward G. Robinson plays a meek cashier and amateur painter who falls for a manipulative woman played by Joan Bennett. What begins as pity spirals into extortion, humiliation, and murder. Every frame glows with moral decay. The film was condemned on release for its unflinching portrayal of greed and betrayal, disguised as love. Banned in several American cities, it was branded unfit for public viewing. Lang was accused of glorifying sin, though he insisted it was a portrait of self-destruction. The production barely survived censors who demanded cuts to dialogue that hinted at forbidden desire. For years, Scarlet Street vanished, its rights tangled in legal disputes. Film historians rediscovered it in the 60s when it entered the public domain. Restorations revealed the artistry that critics had dismissed the first time. Robinson's performance became a revelation, a study of how good men surrender to quiet madness. Now, free to stream. In high definition, it stands as one of noir's most haunting cautionary tales. In Lang's world, love is not salvation, it is the noose waiting to tighten around your neck. Scarlet Street endures as a quiet scream, echoing through the alleyways of cinematic despair. Number 10. DOA, 1950. Few noir films begin with a man walking into a police station to report his own murder. That is the premise of DOA, a relentless tale of fatal urgency. Edmund O'Brien plays Frank Bigelow, an accountant who discovers he has been poisoned and has only days to solve his own killing. The film races through neon-lit streets and smoky bars as he hunts for meaning before time expires. Shot on a shoestring budget, DOA became a surprise hit. Its mix of documentary realism and nightmare pacing broke convention. But its nihilism unsettled censors who deemed the story morbid and unpatriotic. One studio executive demanded a new ending where Bigelow survives, but director Rudolph Made refused. The film went out raw, unredeemed, and unforgettable. Its public domain fate kept it alive through decades of midnight broadcasts and bootlegs. When restored, the film's stark cinematography revealed details lost for years, the glint of sweat, the shadow of death on every face. Critics now hail it as one of the most original thrillers ever made in America. DOA survives not just as a movie, but as a countdown to oblivion, reminding viewers that every second can burn brighter when you know the end is already written. Number 9. Detour, 1945. There are films that define a genre, and then there is Detour, a cinematic fever dream that rewrote the rules of film noir on a microscopic budget. Directed by Edgar G. Ulmer, this 70-minute masterpiece follows Al Roberts, a weary nightclub pianist, hitchhiking to California to reunite with his love. When a mysterious death occurs on the road, fate twists into something monstrous. Roberts assumes another man's identity, but finds himself trapped in a spiral of guilt, paranoia, and coincidence that feels almost supernatural. Censors were disturbed by its bleak message that crime and punishment were meaningless in the face of cruel destiny. The studio tried to push Ulmer to add a moral resolution, but he refused, insisting that noir should reflect the chaos of real life. The movie's raw lighting, harsh shadows, and unpolished acting made critics dismiss it as cheap pulp, yet that roughness became its power. Over time, Detour rose from obscurity to legend. Film historians called it the purest example of fatalism ever captured on screen. Its low-budget charm and disjointed editing only intensified its sense of doomed poetry. The film entered the public domain, allowing it to circulate freely across decades of late-night television, and now free streaming platforms. Its restored versions in crisp black and white expose the fever, sweat, and fear hidden beneath every glance. Watching Detour today feels like listening to the heartbeat of a man already dead. It is a nightmare from which the American dream could never quite wake. Number 8. The Hitchhiker, 1953. Ida Lupino broke barriers when she directed The Hitchhiker, becoming one of the first women to helm a hard-boiled noir thriller. Based on true events, it tells the story of two friends on a fishing trip who pick up a hitchhiker only to discover he is a psychopathic fugitive. What follows is a claustrophobic road trip across sun-scorched deserts where trust disintegrates and death lurks in the back seat. At release, the film shocked audiences with its brutal realism. There was no femme fatale, no glamorous cityscape, only the raw tension of survival. The script was inspired by real-life killer Billy Cook, whose murders terrified America. Censors protested the violence and psychological intensity, demanding Lupino soften the villain's personality. She refused, claiming the film's horror came not from gore, but from the human face of evil. Critics initially dismissed it as exploitation, but decades later, The Hitchhiker was reevaluated as a feminist triumph, a woman's unflinching look at male fear and moral collapse. Its restoration revealed breathtaking desert cinematography and unnerving close-ups of eyes that never blink. Now streaming freely through legal archives, The Hitchhiker stands as one of noir's most unsettling portraits of captivity. Lupino proved that terror did not need shadowy alleys or smoky rooms. It could unfold in blinding daylight under a merciless sun. The Hitchhiker is a scream carried by the wind across the empty highways of American guilt. Number 7. The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, 1946. Before he became a household name, Kirk Douglas made his debut in The Strange Love of Martha Ivers, a grand Gothic noir drenched in repression, greed, and corruption. The film begins with a childhood crime, the accidental death of a domineering aunt that binds three lives together forever. Years later, the past resurfaces when a drifter returns to the town that once destroyed him. Martha, now married to a powerful district attorney, hides a secret that could unravel everything. The movie was a critical success, but its darkness terrified the production code office. The censors accused it of moral ambiguity, refusing to punish the guilty and sympathizing with sinners. The studio fought to keep the film intact, fearing backlash from religious groups who saw it as blasphemy against the sanctity of marriage and justice. Yet the filmmakers prevailed, preserving its grim fatalism. Behind the scenes, tensions were legendary. Barbara Stanwyck demanded control over lighting angles and dialogue to deepen Martha's cruelty, while Douglas reportedly trembled through his scenes, desperate to impress her. The result was electric. Critics later recognized it as one of the richest character studies in noir, a labyrinth of guilt where every gesture conceals a confession. For years, the film languished in legal limbo until its copyright lapsed and it entered the public domain. Restorations have brought back its haunting chiaroscuro, its storm-lit windows and echoing corridors of regret. Watching it today feels like reading a confession written in shadows. The Strange Love of Martha Ivers is not just a film, it is a wound that never healed in the conscience of post-war America. Number 6. The Stranger, 1946. Orson Welles directed and starred in The Stranger, a post-war noir about guilt and deception disguised as a small-town mystery. He plays Franz Kindler, a Nazi fugitive who reinvents himself as a respectable professor in Connecticut. His perfect facade begins to crumble when an investigator from the War Crimes Commission tracks him down. What begins as a polite conversation turns into a slow, unmasking of evil hiding in plain sight. The Stranger was the first Hollywood film to show documentary footage from the concentration camps. Censors hesitated, believing audiences were not ready to face such horror. The studio forced Welles to cut scenes that exposed American complicity in sheltering war criminals. Despite the interference, the film stunned critics with its cold precision and moral fury. Welles later called it his most conventional picture, but it remains his most quietly terrifying. The ticking clock, the shadows under the church tower, and the final confrontation on the steeple create an atmosphere of cosmic judgment. After years of neglect, it entered the public domain, where film scholars restored its lost contrast and clarity. Now, freely available in high definition, The Stranger endures as a haunting reminder that darkness can wear the face of civility. Number 5. Impact, 1949. Impact begins like a fairy tale and ends as a moral riddle. A wealthy businessman played by Brian Donlevy survives a murder plot arranged by his unfaithful wife and her lover. Believed dead, he escapes to a small town under a new name, finding peace among strangers. But conscience drags him back to face the world that buried him. When it premiered, Impact defied every noir convention. It swapped the cynical detective for an ordinary man wrestling with forgiveness. Critics accused it of being too sentimental, while others praised its unexpected tenderness. Behind the scenes, the production struggled with financial troubles, forcing cast members to work for deferred payment. Yet the film's sincerity carried it through. Because of distribution mishaps, Impact fell into public domain limbo. For decades, only faded prints survived until film preservationists restored it, revealing its delicate grayscale tones and crisp lighting. The movie's emotional weight lies not in crime, but in the question of redemption. Today, Impact streams freely across archival sites and public platforms, inviting viewers to witness noir's softer pulse, the rare story where morality is tested not by corruption, but by mercy. In a genre obsessed with vengeance, Impact dares to ask whether a wounded man can still choose grace. Number 4. The Big Sleep, 1946. Howard Hawks. The Big Sleep remains one of the crown jewels of film. Noir, a labyrinth of murder, blackmail, and moral confusion, anchored by the crackling chemistry of Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall. Based on Raymond Chandler's novel, it follows private detective Philip Marlowe as he dives into Los Angeles corruption, uncovering a web of gambling rackets and hidden motives. Censors demanded heavy alterations to tone down the novel's scandalous details, forcing Hawks to reshape the script into a puzzle of suggestion and omission. The result was a story so complex that even the writers admitted they could not explain one of the murders. Yet, audiences loved it. Bogart's sharp wit and Bacall's hypnotic confidence turned confusion into electricity. Production chaos was constant. The film was shot twice, once before, and once after Bogart and Bacall's real-life romance began. Studio politics delayed release, but that tension only intensified their on-screen heat. For decades, The Big Sleep circulated in censored cuts until restorations unveiled both versions, revealing the sly power of implication that defined classic noir. It is now freely viewable in select archives and legal platforms, its shadowy beauty untouched by time. The Big Sleep endures as a testament to mystery itself, a dream of desire, guilt, and danger that refuses to wake. Number 3. The Woman in the Window, 1944. Fritz Lang's The Woman in the Window is a nightmare that begins with a glance. Edward G. Robinson plays Professor Wanley, a lonely academic who becomes infatuated with the portrait of a mysterious woman in a shop window. When she suddenly appears in real life, he follows her into a quiet evening that spirals into deceit and death. What starts as flirtation becomes an irreversible descent into guilt and paranoia. The film was a major success, but it rattled moral watchdogs who accused it of glamorizing adultery and murder. Censors forced Lang to change the ending, insisting that the story could not conclude in despair. The final twist, where the entire tragedy is revealed to be a dream, was a compromise born of censorship, not choice. Lang despised it, calling it an insult to the audience's intelligence. Yet that very twist gave the film an eerie resonance, transforming it into a study of temptation and consequence. Behind the scenes, Robinson was battling exhaustion and depression after years of typecasting. His performance carries the weight of a man trapped by both fantasy and regret. Joan Bennett, meanwhile, delivers one of Noir's most haunting portrayals of innocence mixed with danger. After its release, The Woman in the Window became a template for psychological thrillers where moral boundaries blur and dreams bleed into reality. It later entered public archives and can now be viewed freely in several restored editions online. Watching it today feels like peering into the subconscious of mid-century America, where desire was both forbidden and unavoidable. In Lang's glassy world, reflection is the real villain, for it reveals what we hide from ourselves. Number 2. Too Late for Tears, 1949. Too Late for Tears is greed incarnate bottled in a noir frame. Elizabeth Scott stars as Jane Palmer, a housewife whose life changes when a satchel of cash is accidentally tossed into her car. Instead of returning it, she convinces her husband to keep it. The decision unlocks a chain of lies, betrayal, and blood. Jane becomes the rare noir protagonist who is not a victim, but a predator hiding her ruthlessness behind polite smiles. The film terrified studio executives. They feared audiences would reject a female lead so unrepentant and cold. Censors demanded that Jane's crimes be punished decisively. The director Byron Haskin fought back, arguing that moral decay itself was punishment enough. Still, parts of the script were cut to appease the production code office. When released, Too Late for Tears was buried by poor marketing and legal disputes over distribution. For decades, only degraded television prints survived. Film historians later unearthed its negatives and restored it to stunning clarity, revealing Elizabeth Scott's volcanic performance and the film's shimmering nightscapes. Today, the film streams freely on public platforms where it finally receives the recognition it deserved. Too Late for Tears is more than a crime story. It is a mirror to post-war anxiety when prosperity hid desperation and kindness masked greed. Watching it is to witness the American dream tear itself apart one bill at a time. Jane Palmer remains one of noir's most chilling figures, not because she is evil, but because she looks so ordinary. Number 1. His Girl Friday, 1940. Technically a screwball comedy, but spiritually noir. His Girl Friday stands as one of the sharpest commentaries on corruption, manipulation, and the dark hunger for headlines. Directed by Howard Hawks and starring Cary Grant and Rosalind Russell, it follows a ruthless newspaper editor trying to win back both his ex-wife and his best reporter, while exploiting a breaking news story of a condemned man. Though filled with rapid-fire humor, the film hides a cynical heart. Beneath the witty dialogue lies a portrait of moral compromise. The journalists bend truth for sensation, the police conceal injustice, and the lovers use charm as a weapon. Critics at the time praised its speed, but missed its subtext, that the media could be as dangerous as the criminals they reported on. Censors tried to limit the overlapping dialogue, which defied the code's clarity standards. Hawks ignored them and doubled down, creating a rhythm so fast it felt chaotic. The result became revolutionary. Behind the scenes, tension was constant, as Hawks demanded endless retakes to perfect the tempo. Grant's improvisations and Russell's sharp wit transformed the film into a duel of intellect and ego. When the movie's copyright lapsed, it entered the public domain, allowing restorations to revive its brilliance. Now streaming freely across digital archives, His Girl Friday remains a masterclass in moral velocity. It is noir disguised as comedy, a tale of ambition dressed in laughter. Beneath its jokes beats the same dark pulse that defines every film in this list, the certainty that in the pursuit of success, truth is always the first casualty. These films survive not by chance, but by obsession, by the stubborn will of artists who refuse to let darkness fade. Each one is a confession from a lost century, still whispering through the glow of the screen. Which of these shadows will you step into tonight? Like and subscribe to keep the light flickering.